Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's Superman!
Greetings, fellow nerds. I'm Sasha Wood, and you guys want to know more about Clark Kent himself, the Man of Steel. So let's jump into the top 10 shocking facts about Superman. Be sure to turn on that bell notification so you never miss a nerdy list, and let's get started. Number 10. The first version of Superman was also created by Siegel and Schuster, but it was a villain created for their story The Reign of Superman, which was self-published in Siegel's fanzine Science Fiction in 1933. It was about a man who gains psychic powers and uses them for personal gain, but loses them and then laments that he didn't do anything of note with them. So the bare bones of what eventually would become Superman are there, namely the quest for morality. However, developments for a more conventional Superman began later in either that year or the following one. Speaking of early Superman brings us to number 9. Superman didn't exactly start off as the Boy Scout he is known as today. Well, was. This was due to the time period he was developed in, which was pre a lot of the censorship that would come later on. Superman used to kidnap people, terrorize them. He wasn't saddened when he wouldn't make it in time to save some of the baddies. In fact, based on how he handled some of them, they probably didn't survive. But in 1940, a new Superman was born, when new editor Whitney Ellsworth instituted a moral code of conduct for characters under his domain, including that they could never kill. This code was however different from the comics code, which would come about in 1954. Number 8. Superman is the first real popular superhero who launches the careers of all heroes who follow him. Superman comics have been published uninterrupted since 1938. Yes, even when he was dead, there were still Superman titles. 4 of them. So we know Superman is old in terms of publication, but how old is he supposed to be chronologically? Let's break that down at number 7. At first, it was just kind of vague. However, during the 70s to the 90s, he was said to be 29. But when he died during the Death of Superman storyline in 1992, he was said to be 34. And as we know from Man of Steel, 33, cause Jesus. So basically, he's in the early stages of middle age, which I'm fine with. Characters don't all have to be young and hip for people to relate to them. With luck, we'll all be 34 someday.
Number 5. Ants.
Ants. Ants. Ant-Man.
That's right, we got Ants, coming at you from Action Comics Volume 1, Issue 296, The Invasion of Ants. And it sounds just as crazy as you would guess. The cover alone is super weird and almost inviting. It shows Superman on the side of a building with an ant mask on. He's even saying the words, "Follow me, ant soldiers, buzz 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 buzz, we must capture Lois Lane, buzz 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 buzz, she will be our queen." Okay, you got it. So after a colony of giant ants was mutated from a nuclear war on another planet, they decided to come and check out Earth, as they all do because we're so cool and all. So Superman uses red kryptonite radiation to give himself an ant's head. Not a mask. See, I said mask earlier, I was throwing you off. It's a head. He's got an ant's head. And he communicates with them. This is like the ultimate amalgam character. Clark Pym, anybody? I'd pay to see that. Number 4.
Run! It's Godzilla!
Yep, we even got Flaming Dragons. Superman Volume 1, Issue 142, appropriately titled Flame Dragon from Krypton. So Clark Kent and Lois Lane are heading to the Metropolis Space Exploration Convention Center because somebody apparently captured a space beast. Yeah, okay. So they arrive and yeah, there's straight up a space beast. Supes knows what it is. It's actually called the Kryptonian Flame Beast. I could have guessed that one, I mean come on. So it sprays fire all over Clark and all that is left is still Clark, but his regular clothes have been burned away. So he starts fighting the beast as Superman. And then the Flame Beast swallows a red kryptonite meteor. So Superman keeps his distance. He knows what's going on. He's dodging hits. He's waiting until the red kryptonite's effects starts taking action. And it weakens the beast, so Superman splashes it with water, freezes it with his icy dentine ice breath, and he hoofs it out to space. Then when Lois returns to the scene, she sees Clark all bandaged up, and the doctors are like, oh, he has minor burns, and she buys it, of course. The doctors being Batman and Supergirl in disguise. Number 3, Red Kryptonite. Action Comics Volume 1, Issue 283 has a plot that I would pay millions of dollars to see on the big screen. It would be so weird to see this. Titled The Red Kryptonite Menace, we find Jan Dex and Zogar, 2 chameleon criminal men from the future. So they travel back in time and they set up camp on a hidden island in Metropolis Bay. Their goal is to attract red and green kryptonite from space. So of course the military is onto them, but they disguise themselves. How, you ask? Oh, as a pile of rocks and a tree. And it works, because that's how easy it is. They set a trap with red kryptonite and plan to get Superman to go near it. The plan works like a charm, and upon Superman's arrival, his health starts to decline. So he wishes for thick fog, and it comes true. Okay, so what's next? Superman can grant himself wishes now? How is this possible? Okay, so then he wishes for, you guessed it, Sherlock Holmes to come and help him. This red kryptonite allows for him to wish for Sherlock Holmes. Benedict or Robert, which one did you go with? We're curious. Number 2, the Bat Witch. And no, I don't mean a sandwich made of bats, because that would be disgusting. And this channel, we don't show anything disgusting here. Batman getting his hands and head cut off though? That's more like it. Now we're talking. Released in 1969, issue 186 of The World's Finest, we find Batman in quite the pickle, to say the least. So Superman and Batman have actually traveled back in time to solve a mystery of a broken bust that resembled Batman. So they go back in time and they rescue a lady named Sylvia Ward. Now Sylvia was actually accused of witchcraft. So Superman helps her stay afloat and Batman swims with her back to shore. And then she thanks Batman by kissing him right in the lips. Then Superman goes to introduce himself and Batman's like, nah, I got this, and takes her to the local bar. Oops! So Superman decides to use this era in his favor. He dressed up as Batman and starts doing like crazy witchcraft stuff. So much so the town deems him an actual witch. So he's about to be burned at the stake and then a thunderstorm rolls in. And everyone's like, I love watching people burn but can't stand the rain. We're out of here. Everybody leaves except for, you guessed it, Ben Franklin. Sorry, what? Yeah, Ben Franklin, like the Ben Franklin. He's just hanging out there apparently. He actually tries to free Batman with one of his experiments, but Superman doesn't let that happen. Eventually, even Ben Franklin's like, alright man, you're on your own. See ya, dude. And when Batman asks Superman why he's doing this, Superman says, figure it out yourself. So next time you catch your friend maybe flirting with your crush, just frame them for witchcraft. It works every time. And finally, number 1, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. Volume 1, issue 116 to be exact. Okay, I know I said this list wasn't in a particular order, but I can't not do this one last. This issue came out in 1968 and I don't think we'll ever see it on the big screen, because if we do, I'm going to walk out of said big screen. The cover alone is enough. I mean, it shows Superman flying in saying, Jimmy, what's gotten into you? Why are you acting like an ape? And then the actual ape on the cover says, because he is an ape, Superman. In my body, I'm the real Jimmy Olsen. Yeah, they switched bodies. I'm surprised that camera didn't explode in Jimmy the Ape's hand. Apes are so strong, it's insane. So after a malfunction of a machine, they switched bodies. So Jimmy Olsen's body, Jimmy Olsen, starts screaming around like an ape. But Jimmy Olsen, the real person, however, the dude embraces it. He buys a green pinup suit, even a cool hat. He rocks the look. He even goes to work. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna be a simian sensation here at the office. You tell him, Jimmy. Number 10, Superman versus Muhammad Ali. Yeah, you heard me. This one shot made its debut back in 1978, written by Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams. It featured the Man of Steel and of course Muhammad Ali. So how is this a thing? Well, it was part of the all-new collector's edition, numbered C56. So basically this alien named Ratlar, who is part of a species known as the Scrub, visits Earth, and they demand that they pick their best fighter to go against theirs. Theirs being a behemoth named Hunya. If they refuse, well, the Scrub will then destroy the planet. So Muhammad Ali argues that since Superman isn't technically from Earth, he must be the one who fights. Ratlar is amused by this, as he wants to know who's better of the two. So he pins the two champs up against each other. Now, of course, you're thinking, dude, Superman would dust him, hands down, no competition at all. Well, the fight is set to take place on Boreas, which is orbiting a red star. So, no powers for Supes. So Muhammad Ali trains Superman to become a boxer. So they start training in Superman's Fortress of Solitude. Might as well train without powers, right? Get used to it? Well, the unlikely duo are given 24 hours to train, but using a time warping device, they're able to train for a couple months. Ratlar figures out the device is being used, and boom, training's over, boys, wrap it up, nice try. So the fight is broadcasted intergalactically. Thousands tune in. Superman puts up a good fight, but ultimately Muhammad Ali is the greatest boxer ever to live, so Supes goes down. So now, Muhammad Ali has to fight Hunya. Even predicting which round he'll go down by. 4, he says it's 4. Now of course Muhammad Ali doesn't hold up too well against an alien at first, but he eventually knocks him out of the ring in the 4th round. See ya, dude. Number 9, Rainbow Hands. Yep, I said rainbow hands. Making its debut in 1958, the issue titled Superman's New Power. This might be even weirder than the Muhammad Ali one. So after detecting a disturbance under Metropolis, Superman checks it out, only to discover it's indeed an alien ship. So as soon as Clarky comes in contact with the ship, it explodes. Later on, he goes to fight some crooks, because you know how he does it. When he goes to use his powers, they're actually a bit different now. They're actually rainbow beams. Yeah, he shoots rainbows out of his fingers. How magical. This causes all of the crooks to become non-aggressive. And if that wasn't weird enough, soon after he discovers that he can shoot mini clones of himself at people. The people of Metropolis love this. I mean, of course they do. They get so attached to the clones that even Superman himself is like, hey guys, what about me though? Great, come on, I shot the clones. I'm the guy. Number 8, the snare. This issue was released with Action Comics Volume 1, issue number 592 back in 1987. The cover of this issue, first of all, is enough to draw you in. I mean, it shows Superman with Big Barda, like they're making out. And who's in the background? Mr. Miracle. Just watching the whole thing in horror. He even says the line, "Superman and my wife?" And it's laid across the cover. So what's going on? Mr. Miracle goes home to find Darkseid sitting on his couch. Immediately asking where Barda is, Darkseid gives him a tape to play, which may be the scariest moment of his life. I mean, if Darkseid just handed me a tape, I'd be like, no, what did you do? No, I have to rewind it first. So he clicks play and sees Big Barda dancing for sleaze. They don't show it, but it's heavily implied that it's in nature. So Sleaze takes mind-controlled Barda and Superman to an adult film director. Yep, and his name is even Grossman. His idea is that the adult tape would make enough money to accumulate an army to go against Darkseid. I mean, you know, that or a charity. Sure. And then in comes Mr. Miracle to save the day, releasing the two from Sleaze's mind control. That would have been a real awkward brunch if Mr. Miracle didn't show up. Quite the miracle if you ask me. Number 7, Super Menace. Coming from Superman Volume 1, issue 137, titled The Super Brat from Krypton. This one's fun and, of course, super weird. So Superman has a twin, or clone, rather. That's right, so when Jor-El shot Kal-El into space after the destruction of Krypton, that ship ended up crashing into a derelict space satellite and was then duplicated. The ship and the super baby inside of it. Now there's 2 of each. Now of course we know what happens to Superman's ship, but what about the other one? That craft was found by criminals named Derek and Bonnie. So they see this as a golden opportunity to raise a supervillain. Not a bad idea, honestly. I mean, it's pretty... Alright, cool. So they have this little super bat, and they tell him not to be seen until the right time, because that would be pretty bait, you know? So a kryptonite meteor crashes, and they realize that it doesn't affect little super bad. Oh. So years go by and the super bad baby named himself Super Menace. That name does sound cool, alright, it's cooler than what I was saying. And it's finally time to make his debut and go against Superman. So they fight and Superman used his X-ray vision to see that this clone has something off about him. Super Menace is pissed now because Superman's like, yo, you don't even have a normal body? What's going on with you? And then Super Menace makes it rain kryptonite meteors. This almost kills Superman until Super Menace decided he doesn't want to be a Super Menace anymore. So he saves Superman and goes back home. And that's when he turns his body back into raw energy, destroying him and his not so nice adoptive parents in the process. Number 6, Red and Blue 162. That's right, Superman Volume 1, issue 162, titled The Amazing Story of Superman Red and Superman Blue. It's an all imaginary issue. So that's cool, I think. We just talked about Superman's evil clone. Well, that's not the first time they've had the idea of another Superman. So the Kandorians aren't too happy with Superman at this point. He was supposed to enlarge Kandor, cure kryptonite, and stop all the crimes ever on Earth. And he couldn't do it. Wow, what a loser, dude. You're fired, Superman. That's really, you can't do all those things? Embarrassing, if you ask me. So he splits himself up into 2 identical beings, which, you guessed it, are Superman Red and Superman Blue. And they both crush it. They recreate Brainiac's enlarging ray, they bring Kandor back to its original size on an all-new Krypton. Step 2, get rid of all the evil. Easy peasy. The Red and Blue Super 2 create an anti-evil ray, fancy, and ends all crimes on Earth. Superman Red marries Lois Lane, and Superman Blue marries Lana Lang. And they all live happily ever after, even Lex Luthor. Number 5. Love. Yeah, of course I said it. When it comes to weaknesses, some would say that it's just the thing you love most used against you. Now this of course has come to light in many comics, movies, TV shows. It's not necessarily new. The whole damsel in distress thing, of course it's gonna work. Where in order to keep Superman to bend at your will, you just gotta get Lois Lane or Martha in your custody, and then you can get Superman to go and fist fight Batman. It's the best. And then we watch movies eating popcorn. We're like, yes, keep fighting. In Batman vs Superman, we see Barry Allen pop in from the Speed Force to let Bruce know that Lois Lane is the key. What key? What was he talking about? Well, that plus the nightmare sequence, it was apparent in that film that she was the key in preventing the Man of Steel from going evil and causing this world to look like chaos. Their love is keeping Kal-El from. Number 4. Lead. Superman is the best at playing hide and seek. He can see through walls, so no matter where you're hiding, odds are he's already found you if he's looking for you. But if you were to hide behind a lead wall, you just may win that game of hide and seek against a Kryptonian. How crazy is that? He has vision that matches the properties of X-ray. They call it X-ray vision, but the thing is, X-rays don't work with lead. That's why when you get an X-ray done at the dentist, they slap that bulletproof vest on you, then they like plug their ears and run out of the room. It's because that's lead. That's a no-go in the hashtag X-ray life. So it can actually help Superman out a bit though. See, as lead can block out kryptonite radiation. So it's, you know, it can kind of help Superman, but it can also be used against him. Superman's got a real love-hate relationship with pencils, it seems. Pencils. Number 3, Muhammad Ali. I have to include this because it's too amazing not to mention. Okay, so earlier in this list I talked about how red sun energy can weaken a Kryptonian. So even though Superman is weak now, he's still probably at least a really strong dude, right? Well, there was once one comic book issue where a weakened Superman legit had to fight Muhammad Ali, and it was more intense than Mayweather vs. McGregor, at least in my opinion. Definitely yours too. See, this one shot made its debut back in 1978, written by Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams. And it featured the Man of Steel and of course Muhammad Ali. And it was part of the all-new collector's edition where this alien named Ratlar, who's part of a species known as the Scrub, they visit Earth. And they demand that we pick our best fighter to go against theirs. Now of course theirs being a behemoth named Hunya, so yikes. Now, if we refuse, well, the Scrub will then destroy the planet. So Muhammad Ali argues that since Superman isn't technically from Earth, Muhammad Ali must be the one who fights, which is so amusing for us. We're like, yes, thank God, do it. So Ratlar is amused by this and he wants to know who is better of the two. So he pins the two champs up against each other and the fight is set to take place on Bodes, which is orbiting a red star. So no more crazy powers for Superman, just old fisticuffs. And Muhammad Ali drops the Man of Steel. I would say I'm surprised, but Ali is literally the greatest, so not too surprised here. Number 2, psionics. Kryptonians are vulnerable to psychic and telekinetic attacks. Superman may be stronger than most things in existence, his mind is still just as capable of being brainwashed like most of us. He's vulnerable to magic, so when it comes to psionic attacks, those tend to work against the Man of Steel in a similar manner. Telekinesis can attack Superman's molecular structure, so when the damage is on a microscopic level, it's hard to overcome and pinpoint. The Green Lantern chip at one point took over the Kryptonian's mind in issue 10 of Injustice Gods Among Us Year 2. He's small but mighty, but he can also think small, so you're kinda screwed. And number 1, you guessed it, kryptonite. Most of us heard the song Kryptonite by Three Doors Down growing up. In fact, now that I mentioned it, it's probably stuck in your head. So good. My first song I ever learned on guitar. That's right, kryptonite. Okay, since the final days of Krypton, its remains were now deemed radioactive after the whole explosion thing, and parts of kryptonite were now floating around in space. This crystalline substance has a specific radioactive wavelength that's lethal to those who are native to its reality. The most common form is the type we see in Batman vs Superman. It's called bright green kryptonite, and it's poison to Kal-El. In the comic Batman and Superman issue 44, he gets a blast of kryptonite shards to the face, and it does not look pleasant in any manner.
So, for some backstory, back in August of 2011, DC Comics rolled out their New 52 line of comics, retelling the story of DC's mainline universe in order to welcome in new readers with refreshed backstories for all of their mainline heroes heroes, and then going forward with their stories in a new age of DC Comics. Well, the culmination of that whole thing, the whole New 52, was the Darkseid War, which saw the confrontation between two of the most destructive evil forces around, Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor, who both confront each other on the Earth, because of course they do, and threaten to wipe out literally everything, because of course they do again. Now, the conflict between these two massive forces of evil was orchestrated with a whole handful of other characters, like Darkseid's Amazonian daughter, Grail, her mother Marina Black, the god Metron, and even Lex Luthor's sister. Now, that last one may seem a little out of left field, and it certainly caught Lex by surprise. By this time in the comic book run, Lex Luthor had been the main guy who helped to save the world from an evil version of the Justice League known as the Crime Syndicate of America, who hailed from Earth 3. They had escaped that Earth when it was being destroyed by the Anti-Monitor, and almost completely took over the mainline Earth, but thanks to a group of villains, led by Lex, they were stopped. Lex Luthor and a few other villains became members of the Justice League to a degree, and while they may not trust each other at all, he and Superman began working together. Now, when Darkseid War kicks off, the two of them are together away from the other members of the League, and part of the bad guys' plans was to deal with both Superman and Lex Luthor by making Lena Luthor load her brother with a bit of lead and then send them both to Darkseid's homeworld of Apocalypse, while the other members of the League were facing off against Grail. While it may make sense to you or to me to send in someone capable of doing the job, Darkseid doesn't seem overly concerned that Superman is now on Apocalypse. And he doesn't seem too concerned with making sure Superman is dealt with without question. He denies Steppenwolf's offer to deal with Superman and Lex, and instead instructs that the Blood Shepherd will unlock the pens to the multitude of indentured servants being held on Apocalypse, and to instead let whichever one of them that defeats Superman be given their freedom. Darkseid's reason for doing this is because he knows that Superman's moral fiber wouldn't allow him to try and harm the innocent thralls enough to save himself due to a misplaced belief that there is hope in everyone. But as Desaad says, there is no hope on Apocalypse. That's what he says the reason is, but I think we all know the reason is because then it would just take away from the rest of the story. That's probably what would happen. Anyways, as Superman and Lex are making their way through Apocalypse's hellish landscape, making little snide comments towards each other, because of course they are, but still searching for a mother box as a way to escape the planet, Superman realizes that his X-ray vision is not working like it should be. For Superman, he assumes that there must be lead in the air that is blocking his ability from working, as lead is one of the few materials that Superman cannot see through, but Lex's suit is able to pretty quickly disprove that. Lex is also able to pick up on a strange noise that Superman can't, which is when they turn the corner and are being charged by a whole stampede of Darkseid's manual labor, set on trying to destroy Superman for their freedom, just as the Dark God had ordered and promised them. They swarm the Man of Steel, who is able to barely keep them back with the help of Lex Luthor, taking a club to the face, which shouldn't be a problem for a Kryptonian like him, but instead, Lex Luthor is left completely flabbergasted when he sees that not only did Superman feel that hit, but he is also leaking red from the wound. This is when they realize that there isn't any lead in the air, but there is absolutely no sun in the sky for Superman to be drawing power from, leaving him incredibly vulnerable. So naturally, Lex and Superman start running for their very vulnerable lives. Since Superman cannot fly right now, Lex instead offers his hand and takes off with Superman in one arm, trying to escape from the Horde. But unfortunately, in the skies of Apocalypse, they are still not safe from parademons who descend on the pair, which is when Lex realizes there is no escape in their current condition. Realizing that the massive fire pits on Apocalypse are giving off incredibly massive amounts of solar energy, without much warning, Lex drops Superman right into a fire pit. Not knowing how this would affect Superman for certain, Lex begins fighting off the parademons, hoping against hope that his idea will work, when a massive flash of bright white lights up the sky and blows away the parademons, followed directly by a black and white version of Superman going off about how he should have ended Lex Luthor years ago. It seems that throwing Superman into Apocalypse's solar pits did indeed recharge him and his abilities. It did it so well that it completely overcharged them, sending Superman's abilities into a level of power that has never really been seen before. Now, even immune to kryptonite, he has become Superman, the god of strength. He deals with the parademons as if they were never an issue to begin with, but now his sights are set squarely on Luthor himself. For some reason, the solar radiation from Apocalypse's solar pits not only boosted up Superman's abilities, but it also turned the hero into a massive jerk. Superman and Lex Luthor have never gotten along, but with this new arrogance, Superman puts a beat down on Lex, destroying his armor, making him admit that Superman could beat him any day of the week, and then Superman takes off, leaving Lex stranded and beaten on the homeworld of Darkseid, who, side note, just got defeated by the Anti-Monitor and the Black Racer / Flash back on Earth. Now what happens to Lex next is also super cool, but it is not important to what we are talking about going forward. So if you want to know that story, let us know in the comments down below. But the story of this amped up new Superman actually takes a step away from the main Darkseid War story. And now we move over to Justice League Darkseid War Superman, the standalone comic. This somewhat small story picks up in Metropolis, where the city has seemingly been suffering without Supes around to solve all of its problems, leaving people wondering what the heck happened to Superman. Well, as we know, he was on Apocalypse, but he is coming back, and he's coming in hot. While traveling, Superman found himself in a small fight with a warsuit wearing alien who was just trying to make a name for himself by defeating Superman. This alien absolutely chose the wrong day to test his mettle. Superman arrives in Metropolis in a raging ball of fire as he introduces this alien to the ground. Instead of doing the heroic thing and dealing with the alien in any kind of final way, Superman instead tosses the little green man aside, saying how it isn't worthy of his time. He then flies off to his favorite diner to get some pie, but not before he steals someone else's food, demands to be fed, belittles the diner owner, and yells at a lady who wants him to just say hi to her cousin's birthday party. Like I said, God of Strength Superman is a huge dingleberry. Yeah, well, now that Superman has his pie, he can finally turn his attention to the chaos caused by the alien that he just let go. That little guy, who was apparently unworthy of Superman, has covered almost the entire city of Metropolis in this black living goop that seems to be consuming everything in its sight. But still, Superman doesn't seem to give a damn. He's become almost completely detached from his humanity. Even as Jimmy Olsen comes to him desperate for help, Superman goes on and on about how all he ever does is help and save the Earth just for it to get itself back in danger. He isn't human anymore, so why should he care? Well, Jimmy, being the absolute gem that he is, rattles off the little intricacies of human life that he knows Superman loves, all while being smothered by the black goop. Once Superman sees his city completely covered and silent, still and unmoving, all it takes is a little pigeon to land on his shoulder, and then he shoos it off. But then as it's flying away, he realizes that he scared it away, and he's like, oh no, come back. And then he's cool again. He's like, I should probably save these people. Now using his frost breath, Superman freezes the entirety of Metropolis, freezing the goo at the alien weapon that produced it, and then with one massive punch, he shatters it all, freeing the people of Metropolis and saving the day before he flies off to get the help of the Justice League. Now, back on Earth and back in the main Darkseid War story, Superman in his God of Strength form interrupts Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor while Steve is basically getting jealous of Wonder Woman and Superman. Behaving very much not like himself, Superman basically picks up Steve trying to intimidate the guy, and it starts a fight between him and Wonder Woman. Superman may be the God of Strength here, but Wonder Woman, she's Wonder Woman, and she gets her lasso around the Man of Steel, using it to get him to calm the heck down and say who he is under all that power. He's still just Clark Kent from Smallville. Joined by Batman, who has become the god of knowledge, and Hal Jordan, who hasn't become the god of anything, Superman learns that the amount of radiation giving him this power boost is also beginning to completely break down his cellular structure. Superman, now alongside the rest of the Justice League, team up with the Crime Syndicate of America to take on the Anti-Monitor in his proper form as Mobius. Well, that is until Ultraman smacks Superman away and he seems to just go missing from the fight for way longer than you'd think. By the time he comes back, Lex Luthor has returned to the Earth from Apocalypse as the new Darkseid. I told you it was was cool. Lex put a hell of a beatdown on Mobius, and now the Trinity, obviously including Superman, are going in to make their move. Using Batman's new knowledge, Superman and Wonder Woman are able to put their own beatdown on Mobius until Superman's cellular structure begins to react to the apocalypse energies again. But instead of backing off, Superman decides he has had enough of his cells being destroyed, and he lets off an absolutely massive blast of energy, leveling almost the entire area and finally returning Superman back to normal. That is really where the God of Strength power-up wears off for Superman. From this point forward to the end of the Darkseid War storyline will have to be investigated by you lovely nerds, or if you enjoyed this video, let us know with a comment down below and we will see what we can do about potentially making a Darkseid War video.
The Man of Steel is full of surprises. Here are some weird powers you didn't know Superman had. Once upon a time, Superman could shoot a mini version of himself out of his hand. He can't do it anymore, which is unfortunate, but it was fun while it lasted for everyone but Superman. Let me explain. This was a story from 1958, Superman Volume 1, Issue 125. Eons ago, an unspecified alien race crashed their little spaceship on Earth. Superman eventually found it, but the second he touched it, it exploded. It wasn't until Superman attempted to stop some criminals a little while later that he realized all his powers, except his invulnerability, had disappeared. But to his surprise, he had gained a new power, a tiny little Superman that would shoot from his hand whenever he wanted to use his powers. So instead of Superman just using his heat vision, an extra step was added, and he first had to throw out the mini-him to get the job done. The mini-Superman appears to act on the command, either spoken or mental, from Superman. The people of Metropolis and around the world loved Mini Superman. They think he's the bee's knees. Superman, on the other hand, while he thought the little guy was neat at first, he was getting tired of him pretty quick. See, Superman couldn't do anything. When the little guy was out saving the day, Superman was left on the sidelines feeling pretty useless, and we all know how much he likes to help people. As much as the comic is fun, it also delved into the emotional side of Superman grappling with the loss of his powers and how that makes him feel as a hero. Eventually, the little hero does disappear. A kryptonite meteor was headed towards Earth, and Mini Super directed it away from Superman by physically forcing it away, causing him to disappear forever. Once the mini hero was gone, Superman, much to his relief, gained all of his powers back. I will admit this is my favorite random Superman power, and I wouldn't mind if it eventually made a comeback. Superman's ability to turn invisible and intangible by vibrating his molecules fast enough makes enough sense that I'm just not gonna question it too much. A notable time Superman used his super speed to turn invisible was in Superman the Man of Steel 110. He's invisible because he vibrates so fast that light just doesn't hit him. Superman showed off his intangibility in Superman Volume 2, Issue 175 during a fight against Doomsday. The villain couldn't lay a hand on the hero until he let him. This was also happening during Superman's monologue to the villain about how Doomsday used to not feel pain, so really rubbing it in his face. Superman has what is referred to as plastic features. The language that is used to describe Clark shifting his appearance makes it sound like he doesn't just shapeshift, but actually physically twists and molds his face to how he wants it to look. This power is from the Earth 2 Superman, so like the version active mainly during the Golden Age. One example of a time Superman messed with his face was in Action Comics 55. He stumbled on a fight in which the good guy was outnumbered and also physically no match for his opponents. So Superman snatched the guy out of there, twisted his features, took the guy's place, defeated the bad guys, and then switched them back. Of course, knowing that Superman has the potential to change his literal face around, why didn't he just do that to keep a secret identity? My guess is it's probably easier to take off some glasses than to reconfigure your face every time. Moving into the movies from the 1980s, Superman 2, Superman displayed his amnesia kiss power. Super fun, love the implications of this. How does it work? That is still up for debate even over 40 years later. Lois Lane during this movie knew Superman's secret identity, and it was weighing on her, so in an act of mercy, I guess, Clark decided to give her a super kiss that would erase her memories of his secret identity, and only that. Nothing else in her memory was affected, just those memories. For a guy that can't handle magic, it sure seems like the explanation for a lot of stuff. Many people think that the Superman 2 scene may have been inspired by early Superman comics. In Action Comics 306, Clark Kent was at the Daily Planet's Christmas party. There was some mistletoe hanging and Lois and Clark found themselves under it. Lois promised to kiss Clark as if he were Superman, so Clark rose to the challenge and kissed her as Superman, literally giving her a super kiss. She does come up from it dizzy, so while there was no memory wipe involved, it certainly had an effect. I wonder if the magic movie kiss could be explained in a similar way to how the Professor X Moira kiss from X-Men went, that there was maybe an element of telepathy involved, especially because Superman has shown that he has the power of mind control. Again, this was in the earlier days of Superman comics in Superman 45 from 1947. The hero is shown using his telepathic will control, so technically it's not mind control, I guess if we were being specific. In this comic, Superman had been kidnapped by aliens and placed in a creepy trophy museum. He was physically incapacitated, however his mind was still active, so he used his will control against an alien wearing the tech that he would need to get home, getting them to remove it from their body. He then knocked his glass cage down and used the plastic face twisting thing we talked about before to transform into one of the aliens. He was able to grab the tech, save the other prisoners, and escape, destroying the alien tech once they all got back home. Overall, there is one major criticism when it comes to the whole Clark Kent Superman disguise thing, and that's people saying that only wearing glasses as the disguise is kind of silly. Many people claim that they would absolutely recognize someone if they just put on glasses, and now that we know about Clark's shapeshifting abilities, the man has no excuse, but maybe, just maybe, there was once a reason why Clark's glasses just did the trick. Apparently, they were once briefly hypnotizing people into believing that Clark Kent and Superman were physically different people. The way the story went is when Clark was a kid, he destroyed his glasses using his heat vision while wearing them, so he went to the rocket that delivered him and found that the glass on it happened to shatter in two perfectly rounded pieces that just happened to be the right size for his glasses, because Clark seems to have super luck too. Superman reasoned that the properties of the glass must intensify the low-level hypnotic effect of his eyes, meaning that when he wears them, they help him project what he wants people to see when he looks at them. So Clark Kent appears as scrawnier and less handsome, but the glasses come off and poof, it is strong and pretty Superman. Back in the movies, that time in 1987 Superman 4 The Quest for Peace, Superman seemingly rebuilt the Great Wall of China after it was destroyed. However, it appeared he did it just by looking at it. Now we already know that Superman can make himself vibrate so quickly he can turn invisible, so maybe he was just moving so fast we didn't see it. Either way, it's a giggle-worthy moment for many super fans. Superman's power of total memory was once mentioned in Superman 156. Basically, he contracted a deadly virus and he was just trying to remember anything he could about it from his life back on Krypton before, when he was a baby, meaning he was accessing his total memory power, what we would all call eidetic memory. Now it seems that if you put super in front of anything, it is now a Superman power. So here are just a few incredible ones that I came across during my research for this video. Super mathematics, instead of just saying that Superman was a genius, they went with this. Then there was super heartbeat control. Some villains tried to hurt Superman using kryptonite, only it wasn't real kryptonite, but Superman had to make them believe he had passed on, so he just stopped his heart. Super ventriloquism. Superman is able to make it sound like his voice is coming from another location, even projecting his voice all around the world. That could also be referred to as super yelling, which he has also done. The Golden Age was certainly an era of fun and the gift that kept on giving.
The House of El. This family tree is pretty extensive, so we're just going to stick with Earth 1 for this section. Although very little is known about them, Superman's most distant ancestors on the planet Krypton were Feln, his son Rugad, and his son Tomnu. No information is available on these ancestors, but Tomnu's son Arok is the first ancestor of note. Arok the Magnificent was a warlord who brought civilization to the planet Krypton with the help of a potion of strength. His magnificent strength caused enemy soldiers to pledge fealty to him as they believed he was a god. In his final military campaign against the warlord Uved, he kidnapped Uved's daughter Milia in hopes of forcing a peaceful surrender. Milia fell in love with Arok, and the two were married and named Bethgar and Bithgar of Eurica. A quick explanation of that. A Bethgar and a Bithgar are the equivalent to a governor and a governess, and Eurica was a large continent on the planet Krypton. They had a child who they named Kal, which is Kryptonian for child, and the family adopted the surname El, which means of the star. Kal-El the First grew up to be the second Bethgar of Eureka. The Els ruled for over 20 generations, being mostly benign rulers with a few tyrants thrown into the mix to keep people on their toes. The next El whose name we know was Wabel, a tyrannic Bethgar. Wabel had two sons, Vadel and Hyrel. Vardel became the next tyrannical Bethgar, and after a quarrel between the two brothers, Hyrel was forced to flee his homeland. He had two sons, Japhel and Tyoel. Japhel was a prophet for the god Roa, who predicted a great flood that would smite all the wicked Kryptonians while sparing the righteous, making him Noah in space. When the flood came, Tio, who by the way was a zoologist, called down winged beasts to save the people. Japhel, Tyoel, and the survivors then set upon rebuilding their society, but not before Japhel made another prophecy predicting Krypton's eventual doom. Tyoel had descendants such as Bur-El, who was the friend of an inventor, Kilgore. Kilgore invented several important things on Krypton, such as the compass and the hourglass, the latter of which he invented so that the Kryptonians could keep track of the tides in order to dive off of cliffs into the water to harvest an algae called silten, before the Drotho, a bunch of giant birds, could beat them to the edible plant life. When no one else had faith in the old man's invention, Bur-El tested the hourglass by diving off the cliffs, proving that they had kept accurate time. Bur-El soon married Kilgore's daughter, Wedna, and they had two children, Tro-El and Val-El. Val-El was a great explorer who set out across the Dandahu Ocean and discovered Vathlo Island. His troubled brother was a member of his crew who eventually led a mutiny against Val-El. When this failed, Tro-El and his men were left on an uncharted island which became Bokos, the Island of Thieves. One of Val-El's descendants was an astronomer named Sul-El, who invented the telescope just in time to discover a starship coming towards Krypton. Krypton's first encounter with alien life resulted in the planet being enslaved by a race called the Vrangs. His son, Hatuel, led the slave revolt against the aliens and went on to invent the electric motor and the electromagnet. Hatuel's descendants included an inventor named Wirel, who invented Krypton's first audio recording equipment, and a scientist named Shuel, who was a respected mathematician and computer theorist. He had a daughter named Fedra Shuel, a legislator, and a son named Tharel, who reformed Krypton's criminal justice system. His son, Plen-El, was a respected novelist whose son Noxel was Krypton's greatest musical theater star. After this brief generational stop in showbiz, Noxel's son Phil-El became a gifted surgeon who pioneered several Kryptonian medical techniques. His son Sorn-El was an agriculturist who helped end world hunger on his planet. His son Im-El was an atomic scientist who revolutionized Krypton's industry standards. He had two sons, Pyrel and Uel. Uel was an influential priest, and Pyrel was the commander of the Kandor Kryptonopolis forces during the planet's last war, which he ended by developing a chemical weapon that made the opposing army become passive and interested in pursuing peace. His son, Tala-El, was one of the founding members of the Kryptonian Science Council, which united all of the separate nations of Krypton under one government, and he actually wrote the planet's constitution. His sons, Pim-El and Gam-El, were a detective and an architect who teamed up to stop a plot to sabotage the rebuilding of Krypton's capital city, Kryptonopolis. Gam-El had a son, Var-El, who figured out interstellar travel without the use of a spaceship and journeyed to Earth, where he was stranded and eventually died. This inspired his son, a scientist named Jor-El the First, to develop an experimental hyperspace rocket and go to Earth to study the planet, taking extensive notes. Jor-El the First had 3 children with his wife, Nimda Andor, 2 of whom are very important to the Superman mythos. Getting the less important sibling out of the way, we have Nim-El, who was a weapons manufacturer. He was present in the city of Kandor when it was shrunk and put in a bottle by the villain Brainiac. He and his wife, Dondra Clutan's son Don-El, became the police chief of the Bottle City until they were freed by Superman. He went on to create a new Kandor city on an outer dimensional world called Roken. Another of Jor-El the First's sons was Zor-El, another scientist. When his brother discovered Krypton's impending doom, he tried to build a rocket for himself, but ran out of time. When Krypton was destroyed, Zor-El's home, Argo City, was left intact and hurtled through space with its inhabitants. He married a woman named Allura Nz, but they soon discovered that Argo City was turning into kryptonite. Zor-El managed to delay the city's demise by covering the planet in a lead shield. This shielding held for many years until a meteor shower caused its destruction, resulting in kryptonite radiation flooding the city. In order to save the life of his teenage daughter, Kara Zor-El, Zor-El placed Kara in a spaceship and sent it to Earth. Once the rocket was away, he managed to save several Kryptonian lives by transporting them into a dimension similar to the Phantom Zone, which he called the Survival Zone. They were trapped there for many years before eventually being rescued by Supergirl. Zor-El and his wife then joined the Kandorians on Rokin. Their daughter, Kara Zor-El, is of course Supergirl. When she came to Earth, Superman agreed to train her to be a superhero, but weirdly made her live in an orphanage instead of letting her stay on his couch or in the Fortress of Solitude. She was eventually adopted by Fred and Edna Danvers, a rocket scientist and his wife, who had lost their son Jan and were hoping to adopt a child to help with their loneliness. Supergirl became a powerful hero in her own right before eventually dying in a fight with the Anti-Monitor in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and being erased from existence in the ensuing reboot of universes. She was later brought back to existence in the New Earth continuity with a slightly different origin, where she was Lana Lang's foster niece. Okay, so backtracking a bit, the third son of Jor-El I was Jor-El II. Jor-El was a gifted scientist who discovered the Phantom Zone and created the Phantom Zone projector, a device used to banish Krypton's criminals to the interdimensional realm. This secured Jor-El a spot on the Science Council. Due to an accident where a missile test had gone wrong and destroyed the colony on one of Krypton's moons, the Science Council banned all forms of space travel. Believing that Krypton's doom was approaching, Jor-El continued to develop experimental spacecraft in secret, hoping to evacuate the planet. When Krypton's destruction began, Jor-El realized he had run out of time. He and his wife, Lara Lor-Van, the daughter of another Kryptonian scientist named Lor-Van, decided to place their infant son Kal-El in one of the experimental rockets, and using the information collected by Var-El and Jor-El I, sent Kal to Earth, where he would not only survive, but thrive. They launched the rocket shortly before the planet exploded, killing them and everyone else on Krypton. Kal-El's rocket got to Earth, where it landed in Smallville, Kansas. He was found and adopted by the Kents, which leads us to the Kent family tree. The Kent family tree can be traced back to 6th century England, where a feudal lord named Sir Edmund Kent was killed in a jousting tournament by the evil Sir Oswald Bane. His son, Brian, inherited his lands and trained under a knight named Sir Grot, who trained him to be a fierce and cunning warrior. Fearing that Sir Bane would consider him a threat if he knew how skilled Kent was, he pretended to be meek and unskilled. One day, while in the Forest Perilous, he discovered a silver suit of armor, as well as a sword, shield, and a helmet which could conceal his identity. He donned the armor and became known as the Silent Knight, a heroic knight who never spoke and fought Sir Bane's forces. He had many adventures, sometimes working with King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, before eventually retiring and marrying Lady Celia Penbrook. The next known member of the Kent family tree is an American print shop owner from the 1800s named Silas Kent. He had two brothers, Ethan and William, but they're not really notable. Silas and his wife Abigail had 8 children: Belinda, Emma Lou, Jeb, Joel William, Jonathan, Lucy, and Owen. Silas was originally from Boston, but moved with his family to Lawrence, Kansas. Silas was a staunch abolitionist, which put him on the bad side of many of the locals, including a man named Luther Reed, with whom he got into frequent fights. Luther tried to run Silas and his family out of town, but Silas stood firm. When Silas discovered that pro-slavery legislators had rigged a territorial election, Silas used his printing press to print the entire Declaration of Independence on the front page of the town's newspaper. That night, Silas was shot by persons unknown, although many suspected Luther Reed to be the guilty party. Silas's son Jeb accused Luther of murdering his father and vowed revenge. This threat was pretext enough for the corrupt local sheriff to arrest Jeb with the intention of hanging him. He was rescued by his brother Nate. Jeb had a child named Taylor with a woman named Lily Beaumont, but he eventually joined up with the Jesse James' gang. His brother Nate was eventually forced to bring him to justice, which resulted in a gunfight where Jeb and his gang were all killed. Nate married a woman named Mary and had children, which eventually led to the birth of their descendant, Sam Kent. Very little is known about Sam Kent, but in Superman Birthright number 3, Martha Kent describes him as a spiteful, needy man who worked hard to make his son feel stupid and insecure. Although in this book he is referred to as Matthew Kent, so we'll have to pardon the continuity gaffe. In my opinion, Mark Waid is the best comic book writer of his generation, so I'll give him a pass. This time. Anyways, Sam had 2 sons named Harry and Jonathan, with a wife whose name we don't know. Harry was married to a woman named Sarah, but he died in an accident on the Kent farm when he fell under a thresher. Jonathan and his wife Martha were the couple that found the rocket that Kal-El came to Earth in, and they became his adoptive parents. Hey, Batman's mom is named Martha too! What a random coincidence that I hope is never an important plot point in a movie. Anyways, Jonathan and Martha named the baby Clark Kent, and they were instrumental in teaching him right from wrong, as well as helping him deal with his developing powers. Clark Kent, of course, grew up to be Superman, the Man of Steel. He had a few different love interests over the years, such as Lana Lang, but he eventually married his fellow reporter at the Daily Planet, Lois Lane, which brings us to the Lane family tree. This DC Comics family tree is mercifully much easier to keep track of, although there is some variation depending on which continuity you're working off of. In the Earth 1 continuity, Sam Lane and his wife Ella are the owners of a horse farm in Pittsdale, Iowa. In the New Earth continuity, Sam Lane is a general in the United States Army who had 2 daughters with his wife Ella. He had wanted sons and as a result was cold and distant, forcing his children to do extensive combat training and apparently treating them more like soldiers than his children. He was an enemy of Superman, believing that it was only a matter of time before Superman would turn on humanity. He faked his own death, appearing to sacrifice himself to defeat the villain Imperiex, but was later revealed to be alive and working with Lex Luthor in a secret government facility that is overseeing the actions of the villain Brainiac. After he used the villain Reactron to kill the recently freed Kandorians in the new Krypton story, his daughter Lois called him a monster, and the files proving his involvement were leaked online by Jimmy Olsen. He then took his own life to avoid the shame of being arrested and taken before an international court. In the Earth 2 continuity, his daughter Lucy is married to a man named George Tompkins and has a daughter named Susie, who is a precocious child who tends to make her Aunt Lois's life as difficult as possible. In the Earth 1 continuity, Lucy Lane is a flight attendant who is the on-again, off-again girlfriend of Jimmy Olsen. In the New Earth continuity, she was still a flight attendant until she was blinded in a hijacking. She became depressed and tried to jump off a roof, but was rescued by Bizarro. Bizarro had a weird powder coating his body, which somehow restored Lucy's sight. Like her Earth 1 counterpart, she dated Jimmy Olsen for a while, but eventually broke up with him and started dating another Daily Planet reporter named Ron Troop. Lucy became pregnant and married Ron, eventually giving birth to a son named Sam Troop. After Sam Lane faked his death, she joined the military and eventually was brought into Sam's inner circle in an attempt to deal with the new Kryptonians from Kandor. Sam outfitted Lucy with a mystical suit, which granted her powers, making her Superwoman. Posing as a Kryptonian, she infiltrated the Kryptonians, killing several of them. She was defeated by Supergirl and taken into custody, whereupon Lois disowned her as family. Which brings us to Lois. The older daughter of Sam and Ella, Lois Lane had no greater desire than to be a journalist. In the Earth 1 continuity, when Lois was in high school, she entered a contest being held by the Daily Planet, where whoever submitted the best news report would be awarded a job at the planet once they came of age. She found herself in competition with a young Clark Kent, and the two uncovered an evil scheme by a villain named Paul Corey. Lois submitted her report and won the competition. After graduating high school and minoring in journalism at Raleigh College, Lois was hired by the planet and became one of its best reporters. In the New Earth continuity, she visited the Daily Planet when she was 15, lied about her age, claiming to be 19, and asked Perry White for a job. Lucy spoiled her ruse, but Lois was undeterred, breaking into LexCorp to try and find a scoop good enough to warrant being given a job at the prestigious paper. Luthor caught her and had her searched, but she managed to hide an important paper in her mouth, gave it to Perry White, and was given the job. She and Clark Kent eventually got together, and he trusted her enough to marry her and reveal his secret Superman identity to her. The two were married for years, and briefly adopted General Zod's son Lor Zod, who they named Christopher Kent, but this was cut short when Chris was pulled into the Phantom Zone, while helping Superman to defeat the General and his forces. Lois and Clark eventually had a biological child who they named John. At the age of 10, John began fighting crime with his father as the new Superboy. John became best friends with Damian Wayne, and the two became the Super Sons. After a journey through space with his time-displaced grandfather, John crash-landed on Earth 3 and was kept prisoner in a volcano for several years by the villain Ultraman. John eventually escaped and found his way home, where he discovered that what had been several years for him was only a few weeks on Earth. When his father left Earth to fight alien threats, John became the new Superman.
Number 10. Nuke. Just like nukes are a pretty big deal to humans, if you launched one right at a Kryptonian, you can hold them off probably for a little while. We see this happen in Batman vs Superman, and it takes inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. In the graphic novel, we see Superman go after a nuke, and after he gets a little too close for comfort, he withers up like an old apple. All that radiation gets to him. It's kind of similar to what we see on screen actually. But luckily our sun was in field of view for old Clarky, and he charged himself back from Michael Jackson's Thriller mode back into handsome Henry Cavill mode. We continue on to number 9. If you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, it does wonders for our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now let's go check out some more weaknesses for Superman. Number 9. Red Sun Radiation. While our sun can certainly recharge the Man of Steel back into punch mode, Red Sun Radiation can do the opposite of heal. It can damage Kryptonians because it gives off more radiation. So in Superman War of the Supermen, we see a red sun instantly start to weaken and suffocate Superman and Supergirl. It's because red sun radiation replaces the yellow solar energy in Superman's cells, eliminating his powers. Red sunlight was actually the main source of solar energy near Krypton, but Clark spent so much time around our sun on this planet that it clearly works better for him. Except for his mustache, whenever it comes to that. Doesn't really seem like anything works with that upper lip problem that we have. Number 8. High-pitched noises. You ever accidentally scrape your fork against the plate and that high-pitched squeal that comes from it makes your spine want to like pop out the back of your neck? God, it's the worst. My sister almost kills me every time I scrape just a tiny thing, I swear to God. Well, even Superman gets weak when he hears high-pitched noises like that as well. Now, of course, they're much louder than just a fork. See, his super hearing makes Black Canary and Silver Banshee a nightmare for him, because they can get pretty loud. So Batman tries this out against Clark in Batman vs Superman as well, and for a moment or two, it actually... So maybe if Bruce had the world's biggest dog whistle, he could mess him up. Or that cowboy guy that sings like really high pitched in the mountains. I'm sure if he belted, Clark would definitely explode, perhaps. Number 7, magic. Superman can probably take 1,000 bullets to the body and then walk away like it's no problem. But the magician David Blaine? You never know, he could be pretty threatening to a Kryptonian. That's right, magic can indeed hurt Superman. His biomatrix is a powerful asset, but the strength in it can be used against him, specifically in the form of radiation that's found in magical energies. Electromagnetic or extra-dimensional signatures disrupt his force field, weakening him, of course. Now, it depends what kind of magic is being used and how much of it is being shot out at him, but magic in general has unpredictable effects on him, and his magical enemies have often been the ones that are the most dangerous or come out on top, at least for a little bit. Number 6, the Black Tide. In Action Comics issue 788, Superman is in a world where the air is filled with fire and a force called the Black Tide. This mysterious force causes Superman's chi flow to be disrupted. So he suffers in fatigue and pain until he gets a nice acupuncture appointment. Yeah, in the very next issue, we see Clark getting back on his feet with a few well-placed needles. He even asks if they're the world's strongest needles, and she's like, nope, they're just in the right spots. So acupuncture, it's the only remedy that realigns his spirit. Who knew?
Number 6. There are 19 types of kryptonite. Though green may be the most well known, it's not the only kind of remnant from Superman's home planet. And let's just get this out of the way, a lot of them are very silly. And great, like black kryptonite, which can split a Kryptonian into good and evil halves. Or the satirical pink kryptonite, that changed Superman's sexuality. Some may wonder, how can there be so many different types of kryptonite, and how come all of it came to Earth? But I say, keep it coming. Speaking of kryptonite brings us to number 5. It actually made its first appearance on the Superman radio show in 1943, in the episode The Meteor from Krypton, but it wouldn't make its first official comic appearance for 6 years. Number 4. Superman's death arose out of the fact that the writers had to abruptly cancel a planned storyline leading up to the wedding of Clark Kent and Lois Lane in the comics, because of the WB TV show Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman. The show was planning a similar wedding arc, so an agreement was reached that the comic and show should time the wedding so they occurred at the same time, to maximize on sales. But this left the comic writers without a plot. The idea to kill Superman emerged out of a frustrated joke by Jerry Ordway, and it became a running gag that eventually got turned into one of the most well-known and iconic Superman storylines of all time. Number 3. There was almost a Superman movie starring Nicolas Cage as Superman. It was a Tim Burton project entitled Superman Lives. The plot was loosely based upon the Death of Superman storyline and was going to feature Doomsday, Brainiac, and Lex Luthor. There were numerous versions of the script, including versions before Burton was attached, simply called Superman Reborn. There are some test photos of Cage in the resurrection costume.
Like movement and stuff seems pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying it'll feel a little looser the more I wear it.
But the whole thing never really came together. And while Warner Brothers was excited about the project, they ultimately pulled the plug a mere couple of weeks before the filming was set to commence. There's a really interesting documentary called The Death of Superman Lives: What Happened, so check it out if you're interested in hearing the whole story. Number 2. The Nazi High Command hated Superman, particularly after 1940 when the character was featured in Look magazine in a tale that examined what would happen in the war if Superman got involved. This showed the Man of Steel quickly taking down the Nazis and again really quickly capturing Hitler. This infuriated the High Command, who actually published an angry response in an SS newspaper. I wonder if Cap got the same response when he punched Hitler in his debut. Yeah, probably. So what tops that? Well, it's time to get complicated at number 1. As anyone who spent any time looking at the early history of comics can tell you, questions of ownership got a little messy. Siegel and Schuster were involved in more than one lawsuit to gain rights and compensation for their characters Superman and Superboy, as initially they had been paid $130 for the first Superman strip, which Detective Comics took as the complete transference of all rights surrounding the character. They sued in 1948 and lost, again in between 1969 and 1974, where the judge found that the consent they had signed at the conclusion of the previous case had transferred all their rights to National Comics, including the ability to renew the copyright on Superman. They had tried to renew the copyright in 1965. Neither Siegel or Schuster lived to see themselves regain any control over their creation. After Schuster's death in 1992, his estate signed an agreement re-granting DC all of his rights, while after Siegel's death in 1996, his estate, thanks to a provision in the Copyright Act, were able to retain 50% of the intellectual property rights of Superman. But that was not the end of lawsuits. Those for full ownership are ongoing. While Superman may stand for truth, justice, and the American way, sadly the tale of his ownership stands more for complicated legal practices.